You know what, man? The more I do these, the more I realize how cool this freaking raid is. This is a really, really well done instance. But either way, we're going to be looking at the Spirit Kings today. It's not your conventional fight from a healing perspective. We're going to go through it rather briefly, but just doing this for completion's sake. Hopefully you understand by this point what the goal is. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, might as well get right into it. Kind of complicated, so let's rock. First things you got to realize here is this isn't your typical healing fight. Okay, let's put it that way. It's very, very mechanics driven from a raid standpoint. So what we're going to talk about is not necessarily how you have to heal the fight, but what you should do to stay ahead and stay ahead of both, your job as a healer and your job as a raid member. Okay. First things first, from what I understand, I'm pretty quite sure of this. We're going to call this guy Quang. Quang the Merciless. I like that. I like Quang. Might not be how it's said. Don't really care. Quang the Merciless is always first, from what I understand. And what you're going to need to worry about here is, from a healing perspective, is essentially just his massive attack. Okay? Everybody needs to be stacked up in front of the boss for this one. So what I would recommend doing is just throwing down a Healing Rain, a Chain Heal, Effervescence, Keep Renewing Mist Spread, Holy Radiance with One Light of Dawn, use the Holy Shock proc, you know what I mean? Just don't spend too much. This is going to be whenever I do this fight, I always see people trying to pad in the beginning, and it's a good idea, but you can really fall behind early if you do that, and you might not need it for the end, but as I said, it's a very mechanics-driven fight, and you don't really want to be behind if your raid does need it. So just slight AoE. It only happens, quite seldom, so it's very predictable, very easy to judge. Doesn't really require anything else, but just some light AoE, and then the Annihilate, everyone moves. If anyone gets hit by that, you're fucked. You're not gonna... Don't worry about healing them. They're dead, unless you're a Druid Battle Res them. And then, obviously, the flanking orders will have to be dodged. Once again, if anyone gets hit by that, they're dead. So, nothing on the healing front there. Here's where this gets a little complicated, a little bit more complicated than other fights in here, is the random factor, okay? What you can be dealing with is one of any of the remaining 3 bosses coming out next. They each present a unique challenge for the raid, and conversely, a unique challenge for a healer. Let's assume... We're going to go with the hardest one probably to get second, in my opinion. Meng the Demented. This is the guy who does the mind control, okay? So let's go ahead and open up his page, and we'll minimize Quang. I like Quang. Anyway, so this guy's got a few mechanics that you need to worry about in terms of healing. Just so you know, the tank is going to be getting hit kind of hard in this phase. So this is the first real alert you had. The first boss doesn't really... I mean, it's very predictable, so it should just be... do your job, get out of there. This one, the tank's going to be getting hit pretty hard. I would definitely recommend using something like Hand of Sack on him when you think he needs it. Perhaps, just big heal, Spirit Shell on him, Pain Suppression, Iron Bark, whatever options you have when you think you need it. It's completely up to you, okay? But the tank will take some hits. This is commonly one tanked. I imagine there's no real reason to do anything other than that. So... he's the only focus in terms of damage for now. Next up, boss is going to make you reflect damage. Let's put it that way. That's all you need to worry about. Just realize the DPS who care too much about their DPS, they're going to take damage. They can take a good amount of damage too. And it's going to line up quite poorly with the next ability that's coming out. And that's going to be Maddening Shout. When that happens, everybody gets... like mind controlled, I guess. They don't really get mind controlled. They're just all hostile towards every single other person. So as an individual, you'll want to try to keep yourself healed up. Somebody's going to have to break you. Don't worry about that. But do worry about the fact that they're doing damage to you. Hopefully your raid understands that only one person ever needs to do damage to anyone else. And if somebody else in your raid is also doing damage, they're fucking you. If this does happen, heal through it. Oftentimes I find myself coming out of this phase... the grade's quite low. It's very hard, it can get very hectic, especially if people aren't topped up going into it. So this is a really good time if you're a shaman. Brilliant time for Spirit Link. After a Maddening Shout, if you see people like a large portion of the raid under 20%, Spirit Link will everybody's brow just gets wiped. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, thank God. Really good. I throw down my hammer. It's really the only throughput AoE CD I have. But just get ready to throw the tank away in hands, especially. I mean, the tank's getting hit hard too, right? Like, as I said. So this is a dangerous combination, and it only gets worse from here on out. But I would definitely recommend doing something you have, perhaps Trank, you know, just anything you have to get everyone back up to full before more mechanics start. So if you've gotten Ming second, you're in quite a predicament. I'll explain why. Because the next two do things that are quite placement required, and the only real way to break everyone out of his AoE hostility thing is to be stacked. But you can't be stacked for these next two guys. I'll explain why. We'll assume Subutai the Swift is the next guy, the third guy coming out. In terms of healing, the only thing he's really going to do that you're going to have to worry about is Volley. Pillage, everybody can run away from that, no real damage. But Volley will do a lot of damage, especially if people aren't paying attention. What I like to do is, as soon as Volley comes out, I pop my speed, run through them, and then just open my eyes. Because if you see somebody get one tick, there's a good chance they're going to get a second tick. So you want to be on top of this. Because there's also other damage going out based on what bosses you've had already. And you just don't want to worry about people dying. It's quite avoidable and quite healable. But you gotta be swift with it. Subutai the Swift, right? Anyway, so he's going to do that, and then he's going to do Rain of Arrows. Now, this is why it gets complicated, because if you're all stacked up for Maddening Shout and he does Rain of Arrows, he's going to pin every single person in the raid. If it's done properly, it's only going to pin one person. Should only ever pin one person. Might pin one or two, depending on where people are. Not a big deal. It doesn't really do damage. You can bubble out of it if you're a pally. There's a few options, but it's not. It's just, you know, heal the person up who got pinned. Maybe throw a bit of damage out. Throw a lightning bolt at the arrow. Get a bit of mana back if you have the option. But essentially, it's just dealing with these compounding mechanics over the course of a 10-minute fight, essentially. Okay. Now, the final complication is adding the fourth boss, obviously. We'll assume Xian of the Endless Shadow is the final one. First things first, there's going to be something that needs to be interrupted. If somebody misses an interrupt, you're going to notice. People are going to take a lot of damage. So I would definitely focus this boss. This should be your focus target if possible. Okay. Watch his cast bar. If he gets it off, you know you have to heal. Okay. If you see it getting close, do a little bit of pre-healing, Holy Radiance. Make sure you have a healing rain down where everybody is. But this is, don't forget, compounded now with the fact that Maddening Shout is still happening. So you have to deal with it the same way. And the freaking pinning arrows can still rain down. So it's going to be a lot of movement, especially for the DPS. And you want to make sure they have the luxury of staying alive. Okay, you don't want to put them in a precarious position. So stay ahead of the healing in those two instances. The third, and likely most complicated thing that you're going to find, comes especially when Maddening Shout is happening for some reason. There's going to be these ads. Okay, they asphyxiate to a target, and they follow that person around, and they do AoE damage in the process to anyone near them. Okay, so commonly what happens, I find, is the most detrimental thing that could happen on this fight, and it's just like, oh my god, what the fuck, everything's fucked, is you've just got Maddening Shout, and the freaking ad comes out, and it targets a melee. And that ad is just ripping through the group. Like, it doesn't do that much damage, but since everybody's hostile and you can't heal people, it feels like it's just like you are just crushing your keyboard trying to cast spells. And there's an easy way to prevent this, okay? This is a little trick that I've found. What I would recommend doing is, especially if you have somebody who's doing physical AoE, like we have a rogue or perhaps a monk doing the AoE bit, you can pop Aura Mastery before this happens. Okay, what's that going to do is it's going to give you a bit of a wiggle room just in case somebody does fuck up or somebody uses magic damage like a mage, freaking Frost Novas for some dumb reason, or the ad does come out at the same time. It's not going to save the raid, but it's a bit of a maximization, a min-max trick that I would recommend. In terms of healing through that, you're kind of fucked. If everyone gets broken out like immediately and the ad is noticed immediately, you might be alright, but one way or the other, it's going to decimate the raid, and you need instant healings. This is definite. It's only going to get more complicated. They're going to add on to each other as the time goes. So There's not a definite time to pop things like that. Not a definite like aura mastery type phase, devote, whatever it's called now. But tranquility, stuff like that. Like, just, you gotta be aware. This isn't your typical healing fight, as in I'm not able to tell you when to use tranquility, but just be aware there's multiple complications. Essentially, the first boss does nothing. It's just pad your meters phase. But once Meng's out, every boss after that, hopefully it's the last boss, can become very, very complicated, just because of the fact that there's going to be damage going out and you won't be able to heal through it. If he mind controls everyone and the volley's going out and people aren't paying attention, people could die there. The ads resurrect. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to pay attention where the ads have been placed. After they die, they resurrect after a few seconds. And as a holy pally, I'll throw out some damage at them. The way I look at it, you might be wasting some mana, especially as a paladin, but you're saving people just a few extra globals to get that ad down. And if for some reason that ad does get into the melee, it's going to really throw a wrench in your plans. Okay? But all throughout this, tank's going to be taking moderate to severe damage. Keep an eye on him. Definitely beacon on him. Earth Shield, Hots, Life Bloom, stuff like that. Keep him up. Throw up Hand of Sack if needed. Other than that, just try to stay aware. It's a very mechanics-driven fight. Unfortunately, like I said, I can't really tell you when to use what. What I would recommend doing, though, is especially if you're gonna pop a potion of consecration, you need to use that early, okay? Because what I've done this plenty of times on this fight. I pop a potion, and then the freaking flanking orders are coming at me. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it just wasted that potion. I have to stand up and move, so I can't get the effects. But you'll want to use it. You'll get the hang of it. If you have any specific questions, I doubt you do, but if you do, just let me know. Be happy to ask them. But just be aware of that. The real big thing, maddening shout when the ads or volley are happening. Can become very, very dicey. Do not, if you're a disciplined priest or even a pally, do not put bubbles, shields, masteries. Do not put that stuff up, okay? Because that's going to block damage from the DPS. A big problem that I've seen in the first few attempts on some of these pulls, people don't really know that. So if you're a disciplined priest, do not stack bubbles. If you're a pally, do not bubble, do not mastery before maddening shout, okay? Might seem like a good idea, but it makes the freaking phase take longer. All you have to do is wait until people are around you are healable, and then pop your throughput and get those people up. Spirit Link, Healing Tide, Trank, anything you got to get those people up as quick as possible. But that's it. Pretty straightforward boss. Might not need a guide for it, but just wanted to get you guys a heads up at least on some of the more volatile combos, and I imagine Heroic could be even worse. So get used to that now. Used to healing some of those volatile combos. And we'll see you later. If you have any questions, leave them here.